Hello, my name is Ethan, and for the vast majority of my young life, my name was not a marker of who I was, but a symbol of what I was expected to be. It was synonymous with compliance, with tradition, with safety. I was the good son, the dependable brother, the exemplary member of the church youth group. I was raised in a small, tightly knit, religiously conservative community where the family unit was everything, and everything was dictated by the book. Our lives were ordered, predictable, and rigidly defined by Scripture. We didn't debate morality. We cited verses. There was a clear, established path for my future. Graduate with honors, find a respectable career, and most importantly, find a good, God-fearing wife. My mother would often tell me, beaming with pride, "Ethan, you are the foundation of your future family. Build it strongly in the Lord." I grew up believing that my parents' love was unconditional, and in a way it was, but it was unconditionally tied to the conditions of their faith. That was the unwritten contract of my existence. As long as I adhered to the structure, the love, the security, and the future were guaranteed. The problem, the catastrophic existential problem, was that contract was written for someone else. I discovered the fundamental flaw in my identity, the secret that invalidated my entire life's performance, around the age of 13. It wasn't a choice I weighed. It was an undeniable, overwhelming internal recognition of where my heart belonged, of who I was drawn to, of the language my soul spoke. My identity, my core self, was an absolute contradiction to the doctrine that governed my family, my community, and my very understanding of the world. I was gay, and in my world, that word didn't mean love. It meant abomination. It meant broken. It meant unacceptable. Worse still, it meant damnation. The moment that truth crystallized, a wall went up. A thick, impenetrable psychological wall between the Ethan that the world saw, the obedient, focused, straight Ethan, and the Ethan who existed only in the terrifying silence of my own head. My life became a performance, a continuous, exhaustive theatrical production designed solely to preserve the peace, and more importantly, to preserve the financial and emotional safety net that was the love of my parents. Every word was filtered. Every gesture was calculated. I learned to mimic the beliefs I was expected to hold, nodding sincerely during sermons that explicitly condemned my very existence, repeating phrases about temptation and sin that felt like acid on my tongue. The closer I got to perfection on the outside, the safer I felt, yet the more hollow and fragmented I became on the inside. I was a master of self-betrayal, and the audience, my family, never suspected a thing. I spent my high school years constructing an impenetrable facade. I participated in sports, where I could channel my internal anxiety into physical exertion. I dated girls, a handful of painful, confusing, guilt-ridden dates that ended quickly because the physical closeness was terrifying and dishonest. I spoke eloquently in Sunday school about the importance of traditional family values. I became the perfect spy in my own home, constantly monitoring my expression, my posture, my tone. I had to ensure absolutely no sliver of my genuine self leaked out and put my entire life at risk. The internal psychological cost of maintaining that silence was physically suffocating. It manifested as chronic, debilitating anxiety. I remember nights when I would lie awake, completely unable to breathe, convinced that my parents, somehow, knew that they could see the lie written on my face, or that God Himself would reveal my sin to them in a dream. The fear wasn't just of being punished. The fear was of being unloved, of being ejected from the only reality, the only system of security I had ever known. As I entered university, moving 3 hours away from home, I thought the distance would buy me freedom. Instead, it magnified the pressure. I was now living a double life that was geographically separate but psychologically fused, demanding 24/7 vigilance. In my conservative community back home, the pressure was focused entirely on my future and the continuation of the family line. Every phone call from my mother ended with the cheerful, yet anxious, question, "Are you meeting any nice young women at the campus Bible study, Ethan? You know, the good ones get snapped up quickly." The subtext was always clear, a relentless ticking clock. "You are 20. Your time is running out." Fulfill your purpose. Give us grandchildren. The expectations were not just mental burdens. They were a physical, suffocating weight on my chest. At school, I met people who were open, free, and unapologetically themselves. This was both a revelation and a torture. I had one friend, Ben, who was openly gay and who lived with an ease and an authenticity that both mesmerized and terrified me. Spending time with him felt like breathing pure oxygen for the first time in my life, but it immediately filled me with paralyzing guilt. I couldn't tell him my truth. To admit it out loud felt like signing my own death warrant in the eyes of my parents. The emotional toll of the deception was destroying my ability to function. I started suffering from crippling panic attacks in my dorm room. Moments where the air would thin, my chest would tighten, and I was certain I was having a heart attack or perhaps that I was finally being punished. I hated myself with a passion that felt spiritual. I hated the person I had to pretend to be. I hated the constant, relentless self-monitoring. I would internalize the rhetoric from the weekly church newsletters my mother would forward me, sermons about the dangers of modern deviation and the need for spiritual cleansing. I truly believed I was sick, broken, and destined for eternal damnation. I would spend hours in the university chapel, praying not for guidance, but for erasure. I needed a miracle to change me, to fix me, to make me worthy of my parents' love. But the miracle never came. Instead, the truth only intensified its hold, making the lie feel heavier with every passing month. The hardest part was the deception surrounding my dating life and my social circle. When my parents insisted I bring a girlfriend home for Christmas, the anxiety almost crippled me. I tried to manufacture a fake relationship once, with a kind, platonic friend, but the lie felt too intricate, too cruel to inflict on her. I told them I was focusing entirely on my pre-med studies, claiming I didn't have time for serious relationships. My father's response was a chilling mixture of pride and disappointment. Focus on your career, Ethan, but remember, the greatest legacy is a righteous family. Don't delay the important things. The purpose of your success is to build a godly home. His love was a time bomb with a rapidly shortening fuse. I started withdrawing completely. I couldn't be honest at home, and I couldn't risk being seen as authentic anywhere else. I lived in a state of constant, pervasive anxiety, consuming my days with fear, consuming my nights with prayer, and perpetually feeling like I was standing on the edge of an abyss. The secrecy wasn't just hiding a piece of my identity. It was destroying my entire foundation, brick by fraudulent brick. The turning point wasn't a sudden epiphany or a dramatic realization. It was an exhaustion so profound, it transcended fear. I realized I wasn't afraid of losing my parents. I was afraid of losing myself. I was 22, and I had never spoken an honest word about my emotional life, my desires, or my truth to anyone. The performance was leading to real physical sickness, chronic insomnia, severe stomach issues, constant headaches, and high blood pressure. The performance was literally killing me faster than any social rejection ever could. The constant fear was destroying my ability to study and breathe. I realized I needed professional help. I cautiously began therapy, telling my parents it was strictly for academic stress and time management issues. My therapist, Dr. Chun, was the first person to look at me and say, "Ethan, your identity is not the illness. Your silence is the illness." That phrase changed everything. My silence is the illness. It framed the problem correctly. The sickness was not my sexual orientation. The sickness was the secrecy and the self-hatred required to maintain the lie. I began the slow, painstaking process of building a metaphorical life raft. I knew that when the truth came out, the ship I was currently sailing on, my home, my financial support, my emotional security, my entire community, would sink. I needed to be prepared for total disaster. First, I secured my own finances. I took on extra jobs, working night shifts in the university library, tutoring younger students, doing everything legally possible, squirreling money into a separate bank account my parents couldn't access. I stopped relying on their checks for rent and tuition, telling them I had a scholarship. I ensured my medical and academic records were completely independent of them. It was a calculated, cold-blooded severance plan, necessary for survival. I needed the ability to pay for my own existence if I was suddenly cut off. Second, I finally found my chosen family. I reached a point of desperation and confided everything in Ben. His reaction wasn't shock, revulsion, or even excessive drama. It was a simple, relieving hug. "Thank you for trusting me, Ethan. Welcome. You're finally here." That acceptance was the first sip of clean water I'd had in a decade. I also found a small LGBTQ+ center near campus. Walking through that door for the first time felt like stepping onto another planet. Seeing older, successful, happy couples, unafraid to hold hands. It was proof that a viable, desirable future existed outside the walls of my doctrine. The internal debate over how to tell them lasted months. Agonizing months where I wrote and rewrote letters in the dead of night. Should I write a letter? Should I wait until I graduated and started my medical residency? Should I never tell them and simply fade away? I cycled through every catastrophic scenario, each one ending in an explosion. I realized the perfect moment would never come. Waiting was only serving my anxiety, not my authenticity. I decided to tell them during my first trip home after finishing my final exams of my junior year. I needed to be emotionally prepared to walk out the door immediately. I decided on a simple, unambiguous statement. No defense, no begging, no room for misinterpretation. Just the truth. I needed to give them my truth and allow them to choose their own reaction without trying to manage it for them. The day I came out was a sunny Saturday in June. The air was deceptively calm. My final exam results were good, providing a small shield of academic success. I had my savings secured. I had a place to stay, Ben's couch if necessary. The preparation was complete, but the dread was a physical sickness in my gut, a freezing knot that refused to loosen. We were sitting in the kitchen. My mother was making her famous iced tea, a ritual of summer peace. My father was reading the paper, his glasses perched on his nose, an image of absolute domestic peace, which I was about to detonate with a single sentence. I took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon and betrayal. I put my glass down hard, so the ice rattled, a deliberate noise to break the heavy silence. I started with, "Mom, Dad, can we talk about something important? I finished my finals, and I need to clear my conscience." My father slowly lowered his newspaper. His expression was calm, expectant. My mother paused mid-stir, her spoon hovering over the pitcher, a silent demand for the information. I looked directly at my father. I didn't rehearse the words. They simply came out, clean and clear, sounding almost alien in that familiar kitchen. "I need to be honest with you about who I am. I'm gay, and I always have been." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I have ever heard. Stretched, heavy and elastic, threatening to snap. Time fractured. I could hear the faint sound of the refrigerator humming. My mother was the first to move. The spoon clattered against the porcelain pitcher. She didn't scream. She didn't cry immediately. She looked at me, not with anger, but with a horrifying, blank incomprehension, as if I had suddenly begun speaking in a language she didn't know, or that I was possessed by an internal stranger. My father spoke, his voice low and incredibly controlled, which was far worse than shouting. It was the sound of a carefully constructed world shattering into pieces. "What did you say, Ethan? You've been under too much stress with those exams. You need to pray this out. This is confusion." I repeated it firmly, knowing this was the point of no return. "No, Dad. This is who I am. It's not a choice. It's not stress. It's my identity. I've lived with this truth my entire life." The composure broke. My mother began to weep, deep, painful sobs that tore at the years of effort I'd put into protecting her. "No, Ethan. No, we raised you right. We gave you everything. We taught you the truth of the word. This is the devil's deception. You are throwing away your soul, your future, everything we prayed for." My father stood up. He didn't approach me. He stood at the head of the table, his face white with rage and profound, agonizing disappointment. His disappointment was a more lethal weapon than his anger. Don't you dare bring that filth into this house, Ethan. Don't you dare dishonor your mother. You know what the scriptures say. This is not who you are. This is a sin you have chosen to indulge. It is a rebellion against the path we laid out. I tried to explain. I tried to use words like biology, love, authenticity, and who I am attracted to, but they weren't listening. They were filtering everything through their doctrine, through their fear of eternal consequences. My reality was an attack on their faith. My father's final word was the ultimatum, delivered with the cold, absolute finality of a judge passing sentence. You have two choices, Ethan. You denounce the sin, you commit to conversion therapy to rid yourself of this darkness, and you start living the life God intended for you. Or you walk out that door and you are no longer our son. This is not a negotiation. You cannot live under our roof and bring this shame upon us. I looked at the kitchen, at the iced tea, at the newspaper, at the perfect life I had maintained for 2 decades. I realized I had already lost them years ago when I chose silence over truth. The choice wasn't about leaving. It was about finally, definitively, choosing myself. I stood up, walked to the door, and I left. There was no theatrical exit, no shouting. Just the sound of my sneakers on the carpet and the horrifying silence of the door clicking shut behind me. I walked away from the only family I had ever known, carrying nothing but a small backpack of necessities and the heavy, terrifying, yet utterly liberating weight of my own truth. The immediate aftermath was sheer panic and physical exhaustion. I drove for 3 hours in a daze until I reached Ben's place, where I collapsed in a state of shock, tears finally coming in an uncontrolled torrent. For the next 3 weeks, every time the phone rang, I jumped, hoping it was them, hoping they had chosen their son over their fear. The call never came. I was officially disowned. My parents sent a single letter through my cousin, not angry, but devastatingly neutral. It stated that they had sealed my room and that they would pray for my immediate return to Christ, and that any further contact would be contingent upon my repentance and adherence to their faith's demands. They had chosen their faith over their son. That pain, the pain of being deemed less valuable than a dogma, is a wound that never fully closes. I had to start over completely mid-degree. I lost my small financial safety net and, more painfully, my emotional anchor. I had to scramble for jobs to pay my own tuition and rent. The loneliness was profound, a constant ache that made the small, independent victories feel hollow at first. But in that emptiness, I found space to build something real. I leaned on my chosen family. Ben and his community center friends became my brothers and sisters. They didn't love me in spite of being gay. They loved me for being Ethan. That simple, unconditional acceptance was revolutionary, a balm to the years of self-hatred. I redefined the meaning of family. It wasn't about shared blood or shared doctrine. It was about shared values, empathy, honesty, and support. My family is now the group of people who show up for me on my bad days, who celebrate my small, authentic victories, and who don't demand I censor my life to fit their ideal. I finished my degree working double shifts. I did it not for their approval, but for my own survival. The path to self-acceptance is still ongoing. Even years later, when I experience genuine happiness with my partner, there is a small, residual voice in my head, my father's cold, judgmental voice, whispering condemnation and fear. That voice is the lasting scar of the burden of silence. But I fight it every day. I fight it with honesty. I fight it by walking down the street unafraid. I fight it by building a life that is messy, real, and irrevocably mine. I learned that I am not broken. The system that demanded my silence was broken. My final message is this. The most important contract you can honor is the one with your authentic self. The fear of losing the life you know is powerful, but it is nothing compared to the slow death of living a lie. If you are hiding, know that your truth is not a sin. It is your fundamental worth. Choosing yourself is not a betrayal of them. It is an act of radical self-preservation. Walk out the door. The world waiting for you is terrifying. Yes, but it is also beautiful, accepting, and free. And in that freedom, you will find your real family, your real life, and your true self.